The dark wood moaned, a deep, eerie sound that was more than just the groan of shifting tree limbs. I turned, and my empty basket swung in the crook of my right elbow as I stared into the wooded expanse that enclosed most of Oakvale. My breath hovered in front of my face in a little white cloud. It was always chilly near the woods, even in the height of summer, but on a clear winter day like today, just staring into the unnatural darkness was enough to send a fresh chill skittering up my spine. To my right, a torch crackled, its flame flickering at the top of a post driven deep into the frozen ground. Beyond that, another torch glowed a few feet away, and beyond that, yet another. There were hundreds of them, forming a ring around the village, a protective halo of light that the village watch kept burning at all hours, in all weather. Because the woods were full of monsters, and monsters were very afraid of light. That's a quote from Red Wolf by Rachel Vincent. This is YA Book Chat, and I'm your host, Leah Stuhler.
Hi, I'm Bethany Finger, the host of Prince Kai Fan Pod, a Marissa Meyer book club podcast. Join me every week during my read-along journey through all of the books by author Marissa Meyer, one chapter at a time, spoiler-free. Each episode will feature a different guest, new fan art, and laughter and joy through reading. You can find Prince Kai Fan Pod on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and all other listening platforms. And now, back to the show.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of YA Book Chat. Thank you so much for being here and listening. And as always, thank you to all of my Patreon members for supporting me. I really appreciate it. Today, I have a brand new book to bring to you. When I first got this book, I got it in a book box, a book subscription box, and I was extremely excited about it, just looking at the cover and reading the little blurb about what it was about. And so I had been dying to read it for a very long time. And so I'm excited that I finally get to bring this book to you. Today, we are going to be chatting about the book Red Wolf by Rachel Vincent. This is a Little Red Riding Hood retelling, but also a kind of Big Bad Wolf origin story. So it's really cool. And I have with me today Bethanie from Prince Kai Fan Pod, who you all know. And I have Lily, who has also been on the podcast before. Lily was a guest with me when I covered Poisoned by Jennifer Donnelly, and we talked all things Snow White. So I am very excited to have Bethanie and Lily here. Hello, ladies. How are you?
Always happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy to be back as well.
Yes. And this was a great book, so thank you for inviting me and for telling me to read it.
You're welcome. I know that you both like fairy tale retelling, so I figured that you two would enjoy this book.
Oh, yes. I just coincidentally read it, and you asked if anyone read it. I'm like, I did.
I was actually already planning on reading it, and then I had an Audible credit, and you needed a guest, and I was like, done. And the audiobook, I highly recommend. It was lovely. They did a great job.
Good.
I will not say that about every audiobook.
No, we cannot say that about every audiobook. Sometimes the narrators are fantastic and sometimes they are not. So it's always good when you find a great one.
The worst I heard was, and like no shade to the narrator because I'm sure she did her best, but the first 3 or 4 Vampire Academy books, those are some rough ones, kids. Just ignore them. The rest of them are great, but those first few, it's rough.
You just never know sometimes what's going to happen when you listen to an audiobook. So, yeah, I know how that goes. Today's episode might actually end up being a little bit longer than normal because I am kind of adding an extra little section to this episode. So you're actually going to end up with a longer spoiler-free section at the beginning before we even get to the spoilers, because we are going to talk a little bit today about the original Red Riding Hood fairy tales and what they were like, because Rachel Vincent weaves so much, like so many of the different origin stories into Red Wolf that we kind of have to talk about them in order to really talk about the book in detail. So we get a little bit extra for this episode today. So it's going to be great. All right. Okay. I know, Bethany, you didn't see this, but the cover of this book, okay, here.
Oh, it's gorgeous. I did
gorgeous.
see it. I went to Books A Million the other day and actually got to meet some listeners and sign their books and stuff. And that was really cool. But while I was there, since I knew I was going to be doing this episode, I went and looked at the book so I could examine like the cover and see the pages and things like that. Because I do think this is kind of a strange preference on my part, probably, but I do think that like page style and font style and things like that, I do think that that has an impact on pleasurability when you're reading. So I always like to sort of get a feel for what the book actually looks like and feels like, even if I just listen to it, if that makes sense.
Yes,
it does. Makes sense.
But this book, so if you guys haven't seen this, okay, the cover is Red Riding Hood on the front, and like her cape is open, but inside of her cape is you see the woods and then a grandmother's cottage at the bottom, and it's just breathtaking. And then the back cover too is really cool because, like I said, this is also an origin story of the wolf. So the back cover has like, okay, I don't even know how to describe this really well, but it's like trees in the forest, but the trees make the shape of the wolf's face. And then inside in the middle, you can see Grandma's cottage and Red Riding Hood. And it's breathtaking. Like I absolutely love the cover of this book.
It's like a mosaic collage that I think that's what they're called.
Yes.
But yeah, and I especially love the color tones because like, obviously you would expect a cover for Little Red Riding Hood to have red be like a highlighted feature, but I think the shade of snow color they used, because they didn't make it white snow, they made it almost like a silver gray tone, and I think that gave it like just that extra edge, because the woods in the book are supposed to be kind of scary. You don't go to the woods after dark and things like that, right? That's what Red Riding Hood is. And I think that the colors they used really encapsulated both the intonation of the original fairy tale, but also aspects that we get throughout this novel as well, because colors is big in this novel.
Yeah.
It's just great. And I love it. So that really like pulled me in right away. And then just the description of it did as well. So let me give everybody a quick plot overview, and then we'll get into talking about it. All right. For as long as 16-year-old Adele can remember, the village of Oakvale has been surrounded by the dark wood, a forest filled with terrible monsters, a forest that light cannot penetrate. Like her fellow villagers, she knows to steer clear of the woods unless absolutely necessary. But unlike her neighbors, Adele has a very good reason for going into the dark wood. Adele is one of a long line of guardians, women who secretly take on the form of a wolf in order to protect their village. Her life and the lives of every villager she watches over depends upon her secret being kept. But when accepting her fate means giving up the boy she loves, abandoning the future she imagined for herself, and breaking her own moral code, she must decide how far she is willing to go to keep her neighbors safe. First, this is going to sound crazy, but as I was reading this book and I'd read her name, of course, like all I'd be like Adele's songs, the singers, her songs kept popping in my head.
Okay. So what do you think is the best Adele song for this book? Because I have an answer.
You know what? I don't know, but I actually came up with what the best Taylor Swift song for this book is.
That's my girl.
Okay, yes. Now I'm invested.
I thought Rolling in the Deep was good for this for several reasons.
Oh, that is good.
Yeah. But I would love to know which Tay-Tay song.
Yes.
Okay. Which Taylor song do you think I would have picked for this? I feel like there's really kind of only one option.
Well, I'm thinking the one would be great because we do have a couple relationship dynamics that are present.
Okay. Think more like obvious choice.
Oh, okay.
Yes, Lily, that
out
is
of the
correct.
woods. Out of the woods.
Wait
till we get to Heartless, and I get to tell everybody that Wonderland is somehow word for word written for Heartless, and yet not written for Heartless.
Oh, yes. Oh, man. Yeah, I was thinking about this earlier. I was like, oh, Bethanie and Lily are going to be on. So I have to somehow find a Taylor Swift song to go with this book. And the first thing that popped in my head, I was like, oh, wait, because I remember the video vividly where she's running through the woods. And so then I was like, oh, yeah, that one's great.
Isn't she running with wolves too in that video? It's been a while.
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't remember.
I think I watched the live performance of that one more than I have the music video because I really like the Grammy performance.
Yeah, me too.
Speaking of, because Lily will care if we can say this or not, but I just got a new phone case and it's a cardigan phone case with red stars for the Red album.
Very
beautiful.
Nice. Yes, very nice. In case everybody listening is kind of like right now, like if you don't know and you're like, what's up with Taylor Swift? So Bethany is obsessed with Taylor Swift and Lily and I are both in Bethany's Prince Kai Fan Pod Patreon group.
Yep.
And everybody in there, we always talk about Taylor Swift and all the things. And when I told you this, Bethany, when I was there, but when I went to Y'all Fest in Charleston in November, they literally were like playing Taylor Swift music the whole time.
And I mean, it was so happy.
Yes.
So, and I keep seeing on Instagram, like it's a thing now. I keep seeing people pop up with like playlists of Taylor Swift songs to go along with different books that they're reading.
Yeah.
So
you know why? It's because Taylor's written like 900 songs at this point.
Know.
Even if it's not like her song, do you know how many songs she's written for other artists or helped them write or whatever? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, it's hard not to pick a song that I think I talked to somebody about, it was MNK from MNK Talkway podcast. And they were like, if you really wanted to, you could probably do a Taylor Swift song for every chapter. Because on my podcast, we name the chapters after a song. And I was like, I mean, I probably could, but I'd get a lot of really upset people.
I've definitely picked a Taylor Swift song before when I've come on.
I get some heat from it. Like I do get some people that are like, you guys know there's other musicians out there. And then I have to be like, you guys know this isn't just me, right? Like every guest I've ever had on, at least one of them has been like, have you used this Taylor song yet? Mm-hmm. And I have to be like, we used it for another book, but we're good to recycle.
It's fine.
Because like I said, when we get to Heartless, you cannot convince me that Wonderland is not the perfect song for that book.
It is. I agree.
It is.
See, Lily and I agree. All right. So let's talk about Little Red Riding Hood. Okay. Before we talk about like our thoughts about this. Okay. We all know the story of Little Red Riding Hood, right? We've got Little Red Riding Hood. Her mother sends her into the forest because her grandmother is sick and she lives in the forest. So she's like, Red Riding Hood, go bring grandma some food and stuff to help her because she feels sick. And so Red Riding Hood goes into the forest where she meets a wolf along the way. And for some reason, stupid girl decides, I'm going to tell the wolf exactly where I am going, even though he's a total stranger and I don't know him and he could eat me because he's a wolf. So she tells him, right? And then the wolf somehow, and this always has amazed me how he did this. I mean, she must be like taking her sweet, precious time and moseying through the forest because he beats her to grandma's house. And then he usually in the story eats grandma, although we will find out in a minute, there are different versions, but normally he eats grandma. And he gets in the bed and pretends to be grandma. And then when Little Red Riding Hood gets there, he tries to trick her. And then she's like, oh no, what's going on? Oh my, what big ears you have. Then she gets eaten too. Okay. So, all right. But there are different, that's like our basic story, right? But there are different.
Okay. So just to clarify, and because you said this bothers you, I just Googled it. And wolves can run up to 38 miles per hour. So that's how he beats her back to grandma's house.
Thank you.
Because I would be hella impressed if Little Red be running 37 miles per hour.
Me too. Okay.
Fairy tales, I just go with whatever's told.
Oh yeah. I'm just like, sure, this is plausible.
Yeah, anything works.
You kind of have to have a suspension of disbelief, I think, for most fairy tales.
I like having that, though.
There's always going to be something where you're like, that makes no sense. And it's like, if I focus on that too much, then the whole thing will fall apart. So,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do that.
No.
I I want to be just whisked away.
Yep,
Yes.
absolutely.
So Little Red Riding Hood. Okay. So it's actually like the original stories are very dark. Like it's a very dark tale, but it is because it's meant to it was written to warn young girls about the dangers of strangers, especially strange men. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a version where the wolf eats grandma. Okay. Then when Little Red Riding Hood gets there, he eats Little Red Riding Hood. Okay. But then the wolf falls asleep. And then while the wolf is sleeping, a lumberjack comes in, like stumbles upon the house or whatever. And he comes in and he cuts Little Red Riding Hood and grandma out of the wolf's stomach. Okay. Then they put stones inside the wolf's stomach and sew him back up so that when he wakes up, he can't move. And then he dies because he can't go anywhere and he can't move. I have now this version is funny to me because I actually have a pin that I got from somewhere. I think it came in the book box that I got this book in the subscription box that this came in. It's a pin of the wolf. Okay. And his stomach is a hole, like there's a hole in his stomach and there's two little dangling figurines inside of his stomach, Grandma and Little Red Riding Hood.
That is awesome.
It's hilarious.
You have to share a picture of this on Instagram when you post this video.
I should.
For this episode.
I should. It's one of my favorite pins. Like I look at it every day on my pin board and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just love it. It's so fun. So
now you said that you can't like get past the improbability that the wolf could be Red to grandma's house. I'm always like, Red, how stupid are you? That is definitely a wolf and not your grandma.
Yes.
Like,
too,
how is
right?
this wolf disguising him? It's an animal.
Mm-hmm.
How is he disguising himself so well that she's like, oh, your eyes and your teeth and your ears are a little bit bigger than usual. The fur didn't give it away. The body shape, the smell, the tail. No, it was the ears and the nose. That was really what did her in. I'm like, what are you talking about?
There are many flaws with this story. Okay. But we just have to remember the reason they wrote this story. But yeah, there are lots of flaws. We just forgive them, like we do with other things. So there's that version. Then there's another version. And okay, so these versions, I'm mentioning these because this will come up again when we go into depth with spoilers in the book. Like there is a piece of these different versions in this book. Okay, so including this part, there's a version where instead of it being a wolf, it's an ogre who she encounters in the woods.
Which I actually believe ogre more than wolf because ogres at least have some human characteristics and are not covered in fur, nor do they have tails.
Right.
Yeah, so like I would believe an ogre, especially like because grandmas are kind of old and wrinkly and stuff. Like I would believe an ogre before I would believe that she mistook her grandmother for a wolf.
We'll be back after a quick break. Are you passionate about writing or just love the arts? Tune in to the Poetry Podcast with A. Discover the latest trends in the industry, enjoy insightful book reviews, participate in Q&As, listen to captivating poetry readings, and get inspired by author interviews. We release episodes on the first 3 Thursdays of each month. Don't miss out. Come check us out at the Poetry Podcast with A.
Yeah. From what I've seen, a lot of early versions of fairy tales that I've seen have ogres, and they were very popular in a lot of these.
Mm-hmm.
Because stuff cycles through like fads, because for a while there it was really popular to have dragons.
So in the ogre story, Little Red Riding Hood, when she gets to grandma's house, she sees what she thinks is grandma in the bed sleeping. Okay. So then she eats because she's hungry. Then she gets in bed, to sleep herself or to snuggle with her grandma. And then she gets eaten by the ogre. So she still gets eaten. Okay. And ogres do come into play in this book. So another version, okay, is that Okay. And this is really disturbing, you guys. Like the one that I'm about to say, I will give a trigger warning for this one because it does deal with implications of rape. So here's your trigger warning. If you don't want to deal with that, then, just go ahead and skip ahead a minute or so. So this version really disturbed me when I first heard it, but all the stuff happens. Little Red Riding Hood gets to the house. The wolf asks her, or tells her tells her to take her clothes off and get into the bed with him. And he doesn't have any clothes on. And she gets into the bed with him naked. Like, this is the thing. So like, that's obviously there's lots of implications there for what the wolf wants and what's going to happen. And again, I mean, like, I get it. You're trying to warn girls that that's not okay, but that is definitely a really scary way to do that. And it's just
the original intention of this story seems to be to warn young women about strange and predatory men. And I think the predator part is where wolves and ogres came in, because they're seen as predators in terms of like hunting, and in the sort of cycle of life, the animal kingdom, those types of animals, a wolf, an ogre, they would be predators. And in this context, they're supposed to be like sexual predators to young women. So I always thought that was like a good parallel, a good mapping system. But I genuinely believe that this version of the story, this genuinely dark and disturbing version, this is the one that I think has the most practical sense in terms of all of the versions that I've read, because you're essentially exposing them to why it's so scary. You're not just saying, because is grandma gonna get eaten and still survive? Well, no, but it's a story. Can you put stones in his stomach and then he won't move? Well, no, but it's a story. But this one has enough realism that I think it actually will be like the moral of the story, but it actually would convince them, like, we do need to be cautious. We do need to be careful. And here's a prime example of why. And I know that that's like really dark, but I don't know, just for me, that was my perspective of it.
It does hit the point. It was just disturbing to me when I first heard it. And I was like, oh my God. Because normally, here's my issue with some things. Okay. Now, please, nobody crucify me for what I'm about to say. Okay. I love Disney. Okay. I love Disney. But when you look at what these original stories are, and then you look at what Disney has turned them into, they are so far removed. And I get it. They want to make fun family films that are sweet and everybody's going to love. And I totally get it. It's just like, so, growing up, then you hear the like nicer versions, right, of these stories. You see the fun and light and happy-go-lucky Disney versions. So then as an adult, I heard this like 2 years ago was when I first heard this version. It was just like a shock to my system. I was like, what? Like, this was written for children? Like, I get it, but oh my goodness, at the same time.
Yeah.
So
I'm kind of the opposite. I have vivid memories of my mom. So like Disney, when I was growing up, way back in the Stone Age, we had these things called VHS tapes, and you could watch the movie on a VHS tape. And if you had a grandma like mine, she sent you bootleg recordings of every Disney movie. So that's what we had. And I genuinely remember every single solitary time we opened the mailbox and there was a new like video from grandma. We all got sat down by my mom and she'd be like, just so you're aware, here's the original story. And she would read us the original Grimm version before we watched the Disney version. Or Pixar later came into play when we were much older. Right. So I have vivid memories of like my mom making sure that I was exposed to the original story, or at least the Grimm version that she had, or the Hans Christian or Perrault or whichever, because she had like this gigantic book of them. So I have like vivid memories of being exposed to the original content before I got the bubblegum version.
I was exposed young too. This is how it happened. I grew up with Disney. I love Disney all day. I watched the movies. But my sister, who is like 10 years older than me, she bought this Brothers Grimm book, and I'm like, oh, it's fairy tales. So I was like 7. I was exposed to these, and I just read all of them, and I was disturbed, but I was intrigued also because Disney's lying. Let me dig in more. And it was one I looked at more as like an older, and honestly, fairy tales just increased my love for fairy tales. Disney and fairy tales are like separate things in my mind now.
Yeah, they have to be. And
I enjoy them
too,
for different
I think
reasons.
it depends on the parents and your preference and stuff. My parents didn't really shield us very much. If anything, they were more like, well, we'll talk about it. You know, like I watched the first Harry Potter. I watched the first Halloween movie when I was like 7 or 8 years old, I want to say.
Okay.
Well, okay. So my dad is very crass, and my dad's name is Michael Myers.
Oh, well, okay.
So he thought it would be just hysterical, just hysterical if we all watched this movie together and he videotaped our reaction to hearing the name Michael Myers.
Okay. I mean,
which he does have that video. It's one of his favorite memories. He thinks it's hysterical. But like, that's just how my parents were. They were like, we're not really going to hide the world from you. Right. But if you have questions, like, we're right here. Because I think my mom,
which is good too.
Yeah, I think my mom, maybe because like she was a teen mom, I think my mom was like, okay, sheltering them has really bad implications. Like instead of sheltering my kids, I'm just going to make sure that they have all the information that they need. And I think that, I mean, I don't have kids, but like, I think that if I were to have kids, I would probably have a similar style because I have met people that are genuinely sheltered, and it does have some strong implications. Like my husband didn't find out about, okay, spoiler alert if you believe in Santa Claus, but like my husband didn't find out until he was like 11 or 12. And he hates Santa now as an adult because he's like, he feels like grownups we're always like, you better be good and don't lie. And then it turns out they've been lying to him his whole life. And so I get that. I get why that kind of stuff would be confusing for children. And so reading these types of books, I'm like, well, I mean, at least we're exposing them to the dangers of the world in a way that we control and in a way that's somewhat entertaining and watered down, and in a way that is supposed to hopefully give them a sense of like, okay, the world is this great, happy place, but there are things you should be worried about.
Right. Exactly. Unfortunately, like it's always been a thing where young girls have had to be wary of older.
Oh, even now I'm 32 and I have pepper spray.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like it's always been a thing. So.
And I don't know if it's like I don't think boys have this issue, and I hope that doesn't sound sexist or anything, but
I don't think it does.
I remember shortly after my husband and I were living together, because we didn't move in together until after we were married. And I remember shortly after we were living together, we were somewhere at the grocery store or something, and some guy was like really rude and put his hand on my back and stuff. And I kind of brushed it off, and my husband was like, what the hell just happened? And I was like, oh, it happens all the time. And he's like, what? And I was like, yeah, like, I'm not saying it's okay. I'm not condoning that behavior, but yeah, it happens all the time. That shouldn't be that shouldn't be like acceptable conversation topics, but you're both women. Have you ever felt uncomfortable around a strange man who overstayed his welcome?
Yes. Yes, most definitely. I could tell you stories, but not right now. But yeah, no. So anyway, there's that version. The next one I find kind of hilarious. Okay. I found
that's a good transition. I like going from scary to hilarious.
I have to.
That's fairy tales for you.
Yes. So when I read this, I was like, oh my gosh, this is too much. So there's a version where Little Red Riding Hood, when she gets to the house, okay, Wolf has eaten grandma, but Little Red figures out that something is wrong. She knows. She tells the wolf that she has to go to the bathroom. And she's able to get out. Like she goes in the bathroom and escapes out the bathroom window. I was like, nice.
I love that version.
Clever.
Me too.
Clever.
See, just be cautious, be observant and aware of your surroundings. Always have an escape plan.
That's right. Bathroom windows are great.
Yep.
I wonder if like these types of scenarios and movies and stuff is why I have like such severe
like trapped phobia. I'm not necessarily afraid of small enclosed spaces because like as long as I can get out, I don't really care. Right. You can shove me in that closet right now, and if I can get out, I don't really care.
Yeah.
But if you bar all the windows to this giant room that I'm in and block that door, I'm gonna have a panic attack. Because I have to have an exit strategy. Like that's why I hate flying so much. How am I going to exit the situation?
True.
Where am I going to go?
True.
But I'm like thousands of feet into the air. I got nothing. Like, and that's me. Like, that's just a personal fear I have. I have to have an escape plan of some kind. That's why I don't do elevators.
Okay. Nope. That makes sense.
How are you going to get out if it breaks?
Yeah, I've been
Okay.
But that's what that's what that story teaches you. That story teaches you like, okay, if you see a bad guy, get away.
Yeah.
And she found a way to get out. But I know when I was a kid, I was taught to pee on myself.
Huh.
So I wonder if that's a connection. Like she had to go to the bathroom. No? Okay. That might be too gross. I don't know.
I don't know.
Everybody potties, guys.
Yes.
But I know that was one of the things that like, you know, when you're a young kid, they teach you all kinds of things to like, hopefully, you know, throw things in their eye, kick them in the spot.
Yeah.
Kick them in the Ken Barbie spot. And one of the things they taught us was to, if you can, pee on yourself because it's gross. Couldn't tell you if it works. Luckily, I've never had to try. But
yeah, that's good. So another thing about the Little Red Riding Hood versions is not all of them, but in many versions, there is usually a male figure who comes in and ends up saving her, whether it's just saving her or saving her and grandma, because there are versions too, where grandma
doesn't make it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. But what I was going to say, which we've already said, but the other thing is there are versions where like grandma's like shoved in a closet or something hiding. And so she's still alive.
Isn't there a version where she eats her grandma?
Yes. The one
where like the wolf feeds her grandma.
Okay.
Like, I haven't heard to Google it, but I swear there's a version where where the wolf feeds her grandmother in like a soup or something.
Yeah, he's like, go into the pantry. There's rice and steak, and it's her grandma.
Right.
I have never heard that. I did not find that when I was looking up this stuff.
I remember that being where she got naked, that being in the same one. Well, oh, now there's like.
I was thinking that too.
Yeah, that's where I heard it.
Okay. Well, I did not hear that connection, but okay. All right. I believe
it's the Charles Perrault version.
Okay. Which
slices the corpse into meat cuts, as well as gathering her blood in the bottle and says to go to the cellar where there's meat and wine.
Okay.
And that is also, for those of you who don't know who Charles Perrault is, he is the most accurate version of Cinderella, because a lot of people attribute Cinderella to Brothers Grimm, which they do have a version, but the pumpkin, the shoes, and the fairy godmother are all from the Charles Perrault version of Cinderella.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Good to know.
Little fairy tale.
I was actually going to bring
for us.
She is correct. I've read Brothers Grimm the most, but I like prose too.
Same.
I was actually going to bring up Perrault because and if you don't know, he is a French folklorist. And I found this interesting because he said that he chose a wolf as a villain because they're similar to people. And this comes in very handy in this book. Okay, so I'm going to read what I found on this website. It says, in order to cast any doubts away regarding the moral of the story, okay, according to Perrault, the story should be a forewarning for young pretty girls to avoid strangers. Further, he noted that he chose a wolf to be a villain because wolves resembled people. Some of them might not be noisy or hateful, but they deceive with their gentleness, enter the young girls' homes, and turn out to be fatal. For what happens in this book, this is perfect. Like she really pulled from Perrault's version for this book, which you guys will find out when we get in the spoiler section. Another interesting thing that I found was that there's a second. So there's apparently 2 Grimm versions of this. And the second Grimm version is where Red and her grandmother encounter the wolf, and then there's another wolf that comes, they wise up this time. So like what they end up doing is Red ignores the wolf in the woods. She goes to grandma's house. Grandma does not let him in. They lure him to the chimney with the smell of food and water. So like they make food and put it in the bottom of the, like the fireplace, whatever, and waft the smell up. So then the wolf smells it and they put water in there and he goes down the chimney and he drowns in the water.
Yes.
So I thought that's an interesting version.
It's kind of like we learned our lesson, but the wolf didn't kind of story, you know?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's the one I've read the most. I like that one.
All right. So those are our versions of Little Red Riding Hood. And a lot of that, most of that is going to come in handy when we go into the spoiler section. But before we do spoilers, let's talk about what our overall thoughts are about the book. Lily, why don't you go first and tell us what you thought?
All right. Yeah. So it's been a few months since I've read it. So
That's okay.
Some things are a little rusty, but yeah, I really enjoyed it because actually before this book didn't read many Little Red Riding Hood retellings. The one that only stuck out to me was from the Lunar Chronicles, obviously. I plan to read more, but I thought this was a really good one. I thought it was an interesting take. I like the things pulled from different versions I like to pick out. I always love that with fairy tales. I love ones that do that. And yeah, I just really enjoyed it. I liked the main character and I liked where the story went.
Good. All right, Bethany, what about you?
I think I would have to say what I loved most about this book is that it's a standalone, which I found really spooky because I remember I messaged Leah about 3/4 of the way through. I'm like, is it a series?
That's what
because
I thought too.
I was struggling with like how much she was going to expose by the end of the book. But what I loved most about this book was all of the different avenues she chose for the book, because typically with Little Red Riding Hood stories, I feel like you get 3 things and that's kind of it. You get a grandma, a wolf, and Red. And I feel like her version included so many more elements of the story, and that's what makes it unique and that's what makes it beautiful. And when I was reading it, I remember thinking like, wow, what an interesting thing to include. And I would compare it in my mind to other fairy tale adaptations because like Lily, obviously I'm most familiar with Scarlet, which is from the Lunar Chronicles, but all of those fairy tale adaptations are relatively loose because they all take place in the same series and in the same world. You can't dedicate too much time to one retelling versus the others. And so getting to go from like something as kind of basic as Scarlet to something as intransitive as this book, I thought was just such a wild kind of transition because there is so much more included in this book. And I think what I love most is that she tried to incorporate so many different avenues, but the story didn't feel like a checkbox. It didn't feel like a list of things that she could have included. Right. If anything, it was more like every time there was a new twist or a new turn, I was kind of like, wow, I didn't see that coming. And as for an avid reader of YA fantasy and fairy tales in particular, it is amazing when I can read a book and I did not see that coming. Like that makes me genuinely happy. And that to me, especially with a retelling, is genuinely impressive.
It is. I agree with all of what you said too. I really loved it. I thought that it was very beautifully written. It's a very unique perspective and very creatively told. And I love that. Again, I agree in that, I love that she brought in so many elements of the different versions of Red Riding Hood. But I also love that she made it a wolf origin story in a way. And so we find out more about the wolf, and I love the way she did it. It's very creative. It's not something I had ever thought about before, like for this story. So it really drew me in a lot. And that was actually when I got the book and I read there's a note from the author that came with it from the book box. And, when I read it in her note, she wrote that it's an origin story for the wolf. I was like, ooh, like that's what really intrigued me and pulled me in. Okay. I will say now too, this book is the first book I've read in like forever that has a love triangle in it.
That you don't hate?
Well, yeah.
Because I hate love triangles, but I didn't mind this one.
Yeah.
This one was all right to me. I say I don't really care for them either.
Yeah. And I mean, like normally I read, like enemies to lovers or best friends to lovers or strangers to lovers. It's been a long time since I've read anything with a love triangle, and didn't hate it. So.
I'm not a fan of love triangles. I'm really not. It's very difficult to do them well. It's difficult to do them in a way where I don't end up hating one or more of the characters, or even hating the main character a little bit, just for like having so many conflicting feelings that feel more like cheating than actual struggles emotionally. So I would say that this was perhaps the first time in years that I read a love triangle and I wasn't like, oh,
yeah,
because also it felt like it was done in a way that was very authentic to the characters. It fit perfectly with the story. It wasn't just there. Like one of the things I hate about the Twilight series is that after a few scenes where Bella is like, I want Edward, after that, it's like, okay, so this is just like your version of extra tension in the story. Like, and you drag it on for another 3 books. Why?
Ugh. Yeah.
But I digress. I'm sorry. But
it's okay.
I like when authors can do it in a way that doesn't frustrate me or annoy me or stress me out, because I do get easily stressed out. And I'm like, why would you pick that one? Which I did have a couple moments. And I will say there were a couple moments where I'm like, pick the other one, pick the other one, pick the other one. We'll get to that in spoilers.
Yes.
But I do think the author did a good job. I don't think it took away from the story. And I actually do think it was necessary and contributed well to the character growth of Adele specifically.
Definitely. I agree.
Me too.
I really loved too her description of the dark woods.
That was so good.
How creepy it felt. I mean, okay, the first
especially if you're listening to the audiobook, because her tone of voice and her octave of her voice always changes when she goes into the dark wood. She might be talking like this, but then when she goes into the dark wood, she always takes on a somber note and she lowers her octave just a little bit. And it's this like creepy, eerie transition from like, we're reading a story to like, now we're in the bad place.
Yes. I mean, the opening sentence of the book is, the dark wood moaned, a deep, eerie sound that was more than just the groan of shifting tree limbs. Like, that's the opening sentence. So right away, it paints you a picture of what the dark wood is going to be like, this creepy feeling wood. And I just loved it. And I liked too how the village had a very like French village, like 1800s-ish type feel. The storyline parts of it were also, for me at least, very reminiscent of like the Salem witch trials and what happened there.
So that wasn't just me of like picturing kind of colonialism.
No, I definitely had like Salem witch trial vibes for sure.
I'm very glad that's not just me, because especially with some of the actions that are taken against the bad guy. But there are moments where I was like, ooh, that's Salem witch trial-y.
Yes. Well, and then too, I don't know if either of you have ever seen the movie The Village by M. Night Shyamalan. Yeah. But it definitely
movie terrifies me even now.
Well, it definitely has like,
I'm easily spooked. I will say that. So it's not necessarily a very scary movie. I'm just like, I'm very easy to terrify.
But it's same, Bethany. Like you mentioned Halloween. I didn't even see that till last year, and I'm 21.
I can't watch it now. Are you kidding? No.
I'm just sitting there. And it was like this outside graveyard thing too. I'm like, this is perfect for watching this for the first time.
Oh yeah. But like in The Village and that movie, it's the same type of thing where he creates this, kind of feeling about the wood, like the woods, you can't go into the woods because
the woods are bad, the woods are scary. And then, and throughout the film, anytime you hear like the brush of wind on a tree, and there's like it's almost like a dun dun dun, like from Law and Order, where it goes, gong, gong. Like it's kind of like that, where it's like, oh, I know something spooky is about to happen.
Yes, it is. So We definitely get that. But yeah, I think this was like a fantastic read. If you are listening and, just listening to this beginning spoiler-free part, trying to determine if you should read this or not, I highly recommend this book. Very original, creative, beautifully, beautifully written. And again, if you're a fan of like book covers and you buy books for the covers, you'll want this one because it's gorgeous.
We know we're not supposed to do that, but we all do.
But we
it.
do. We
do.
Don't lie. You all do it. I definitely do it. I got no shame.
Yep.
The good cover is a solid opener for me.
Same. I love it. All right. So there you have it, everyone. All right. I think we need to go into spoilers now for this because it's so good. So good. All right. So if you have not yet read Red Wolf by Rachel Vincent and you do not want it spoiled, then this is the part where you stop listening, you go read the book, and then you come back and listen to the rest of the episode after you finish reading it. But if you have read the book or you just don't care about spoilers, then by all means, continue listening. Okay, here we go. I do kind of want to start with the love triangle.
I was going to start with the color red.
Okay, well, we'll get it. It all ties in. So,
the love triangle.
Oh man. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
all right. Wait. Which team are you guys?
That was rough. So when I first started it, because it changes. It changes, didn't it?
I know, and that's what I loved so much about the love triangle concept, because usually I'm like pretty quick to which team I'm on, and it's really hard to turn me in another direction.
Yeah.
Like with the Hunger Games, I was team PETA from him throwing the bread at her. Okay.
Oh yeah, me
Same.
too.
Especially when the movies came out. I'm sorry. I know everybody's obsessed with Liam Hemsworth.
No.
Josh Hutcherson. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Way more attractive to me.
Me too.
But I remember the
All
same
day.
with like the Twilight ones that I mentioned earlier. I'm like, after the second book, when she's like, I choose Edward, I'm like, okay, done. You chose Edward. And then they keep going back and forth with Jacob. And I'm like, no, she said, we're done. She's going to marry him. Like, we need to move on. Like,
Yep. But I liked her relationship with Granger at the beginning. Like we have this established relationship. They're already in love with each other. They want to get married. And he's a member of the Watch, and he's a protector of the village, which she loves, and it's a big deal, and they have this really sweet relationship. So then, and like Rachel Vincent makes you all like love this relationship, right? Until then, Mom drops the bomb on Adele that she's betrothed to Max, who's from a different village, and you're like, what the heck, Mom? What are you talking about? Right. But then Max gets there. He comes to her village. And at first he is like, he's trying so hard. But in his defense, he's known about this betrothal for 3 years.
I don't think he was unaware
out.
either. I don't think anyone was like, hey, when you get there, you might have to convince her. I think he was under the impression that he was like meeting his future bride, not that he was like going to woo her and court her.
And he
I
says
think getting there and her being like, I'm actually in love with somebody else. She was like, and I swear there's a moment where he was like, well, that's cool, but I mean, we're getting married, so you should probably stop. Like, because to him, it's like, it's a done deal. I'm marrying you. You're marrying me. I don't know what this other guy is, because this is what's happening.
And poor Max, so she's 16 and he's 19, but he's known since he was 16 about this. So
he's had 3 years and she's had 3 days.
And she only just finds out because she's just transitioning. She just found out about being a guardian because she just had her first change.
Which, can we just say, like, mom, give this girl more information.
You know what it's like? Okay. What
did we just talk about where I'm like, my parents exposed me to a lot, but at least they explained everything.
Yeah.
You know what this made me think of? Okay. Sorry if this is TMI here, but
I talked about potty earlier. So.
No, but this is worse than that. It's like if your mother never told you about getting your period and then one day you get it.
Right?
Well,
exactly.
This is worse though, because she turns into a wolf. she turns into a wolf, which, okay, back to Perrault, his story about him picking a wolf because he felt like the wolf was so very close to being a human. Well, in this case, the guardians are werewolves. So they're both wolf and human. So that's where she pulled that from. But anyway, we could talk about that in a minute. So yeah, so I ended up.
But I think that's a great comparison because that's something that you definitely need to prepare girls for. And you know what? You should prepare boys for it too. I get real frustrated when boys mock girls or make fun of girls or get grossed out by girls. It's human biology. We can't help it.
Yeah, exactly. But so after we get over this, like, and we find out that, you know, Max has known about this for 3 years. And then as she starts to go through all these different things and events that happen, I totally flipped over to Team Max and was like, you need to listen to your mother, Adele. You need to dump Granger because he's totally not going to get it. And Max, he made her, this is where he really got me. He made her a crossbow. I mean, I was like, I'll marry you, Max.
Granger felt very, even from the beginning, and I know that this skips ahead a lot, but even from the beginning, he felt very aggressive in terms of like my way or the highway kind of thing. And we see this severely in the end when everyone is gaslighting him. So I can't blame him for that one. He's being gaslit by an entire village and he's definitely not wrong. But we see little elements of that play out later in his sort of commitment to what he views as the truth. And I think there are just too many times in the beginning with him, you know, you're kind of on his side. You're like, who's this other guy coming in to steal his girl? But closer to the middle and then definitely towards the end, you're like, this guy's kind of a dick.
Right. He totally
like, not just to her, but like to other people in the village. Like he has kind of like a, maybe he was given too much power too young in life, being on the watch and his father being who he was or something. Yeah. But man, you know what, Leah, your husband is in the military. Mm-hmm. My husband is in the military. We've met men like this before who are in the military. And so they think like, oh, I'm the toughest guy in the room. And it's like, calm down.
Yep, exactly.
That's how I felt about him. Even in the beginning, I'm like, something feels off here. That's working with me. I don't like this. And then Max comes in and I'm like, he's more chill. He's a cool guy.
I would much rather hang out with Max.
And he's super sweet too, because he tells her, you know, he does tell her that he says, this is so cute, I've never tried to woo a girl before. And I didn't expect you to be in love with someone else before you even met me. And, you know, and he tells her he's not excited to having to be like competing for her hand, but he wants her to know that he does really like her. And then later on, he says, because they're going to go like into the woods together. He's going to help her in the woods. And, you know, do like her rounds or whatever to check and make sure everything's okay. Not there aren't any monsters around. Mm-hmm. And they're talking and, you know, she's like talking as if he's going to be her like assistant, you know, and he says, perhaps I haven't been entirely clear about that. I don't want to be your assistant, Adele. I want to be your partner.
Yeah, it's not happen.
Yes, so like, it's great because, and then, you know, and he says, I want to help you in any way I can for as long as you'll let me. And it's just like, because his mother is a guardian, you know, and he's known for the past 3 years about this. He understands her, which is what Adele's mother was trying to tell her. Like, you have to marry him. I was betrothed to your dad because you have to marry somebody who understands.
I think also what makes him a better match is he genuinely values her opinion and he encourages her thought process and he encourages her in terms of conversation and questioning the world around them. Like when we get to the later parts of the book where she starts to question how they determine what is good and what is evil. Granger is very quick to dismiss any concept of that.
Right.
Very quick to dismiss it. And he's definitely judgmental of her for even even suggesting that there might be an alternative to what he's been taught his whole life. Whereas Max is like, well, let's talk about it. Maybe you're right. Maybe we do need to look at this a different way. I'm all ears.
Yeah. Sorry.
Get it?
You said all ears and it just,
I made a funny
wolf ears. Oh, I love too when they first go in the woods together. It's the same scene. They first go in the woods together and she hears something, but his ears are really good. Like he's trained himself to hear even the slightest noises. So he can hear things further away than she actually can. And then he, is able to tell her, because like she hears something and she thinks it's a snake. And he's like, oh no, this is much bigger than an ordinary snake. It only sounds small because it's not close yet. And he, explains to her how he can hear it. And this whole scene, I'm like, Adele, he is like the perfect partner for you. Like you can
and not just
together
husband,
so well.
Partner.
Yeah.
Like he has trained himself on how to be her partner, and not just as a partner in terms of like relationships and love and how they're going to share their life together, but a partner in how to protect this village together. Like he's not letting her wander out there unaccompanied. He's not only going to help her, he gave her the weapon that she was going to need, and he's teaching her how to use it.
And he knows the names of some of these creatures that she doesn't even know.
Yes.
Like this first one, the fear lieth. She's like, what is that? She didn't even know what it was, but he knows about like all these creatures. And
well, think about like what this could entail 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road. Now he's going to be teaching this to their children. Their children are going to be better prepared because of having a father like this.
Yep.
And I know that takes some of the like love stuff out of it, but sometimes love isn't the practical solution in terms of marriage and partnership.
Which is what her mother was trying to teach her.
Right. Which I get, being young and wanting to be in love and married for love. I married for love. Like I have no room to talk, but like I have grandparents that had an arranged marriage and it worked out for them, because sometimes you're not given the privilege of falling in love.
Right.
Yeah. It just depends on the person, really.
Yeah.
And the circumstances.
And it does. Yeah. And it does end up working out that like, she does end up having feelings for him. And so you get the idea by the end of this, that they are going to be happy together when they get married. They are getting married. She's, Granger is not anymore.
Yeah.
I felt slightly bad for Granger. Like, I feel like
I feel bad for the hand and the gaslighting. I don't feel bad that he's not marrying Adele.
Oh, no.
I don't feel bad.
But I feel bad for the gaslighting and the hand, because he did not do anything he was not trained to do. It didn't come from a place of malice or even ignorance necessarily.
Right. Yeah, he could tell.
He was unaware of who it was, but not unaware of how dangerous the situation was. And then an entire village gaslit him until he lost his hand.
Right.
Like,
and
he has all of my sympathy, but completely separated from like the Adele thing.
And he did see the pup switch from a human child to a werewolf, or the other way around.
The other way around, but yeah.
And she was right there. And so the poor guy, like, think about it. Like, you saw something, this person with you saw the exact same thing, but they're lying about it. And everybody
that's literally
thinks
the
that
definition
you're
of
crazy.
gaslighting.
Yeah. And so I did feel really bad for him, but she did try to help him. Adele's like trying to convince him, you need to say this. I'm trying to help you and save you. Read between the lines here. Just say this, even though he was
very strong to his convictions. And I don't necessarily blame him for that. Like, I personally, would I want to be accused? I might have done the same thing if I were in his position. Like, I'd rather be considered crazy, but at least I know what I saw, than admitting to harming a child when I know I didn't.
Right.
Like, I wouldn't want to admit to a crime I didn't commit just for the sake of forgiveness, I guess, or propriety, or however, or what's best for the community. Like, so I can't necessarily fault him for for not going back on his word, especially because by the end, it's like, you guys know the only reason that he would even go back on his word is to keep his hand.
Right.
Which could we talk about how vulgar it is and barbaric that they cut off his hand?
Right.
I know.
Like, I get what they're saying. They're like, well, he can't kill anybody with a sword if he can't yield one. But dude,
I don't think they had to go that far.
Right. Like, I think there's other ways to tell him he can't be a guardian anymore.
Yeah, just take away his privilege of that. You don't have to cut off his hand.
No, dude needs his hand.
But again, I mean, think about it though. It's very like, it's the time frame, you know, the time period that it takes place in too. And it's very Salem witch trial, because that's what they burned other people who they thought were like witches or magical or monsters, creatures, whatever. Right.
Yeah. They did it to her father, right?
Yes. Her father, they did it to her father. And so, you know, that's the type of society that they're living in, where they're gonna do those kinds of things to people.
Vulgar and barbaric, you mean?
Yeah. Yes. Vulgar and barbaric things. Very, very much so.
Which, like, to be fair, in the eyes of the village, because they don't know what really happened, he harmed a small girl. He stabbed a little girl who was like, what, 6 years old or something?
Yeah. Poor little Rami.
So as far as the village is concerned, he stabbed, maimed, and almost murdered a child. I get why they were like, dude, no more swords, okay? Like, I definitely get where they were coming from. But as a reader, you know that he was innocent. So I think it's just, as a reader, we feel a little bit more sympathetic to his loss, because we know that he wasn't guilty of what they accused him.
Right. And Adele knows that too.
Yeah. And that she does struggle with that. She does struggle a lot with what to reveal to the public and what to keep to herself. And again, this is a moment where Max is a really good partner for her. And he doesn't mansplain anything to her. He doesn't tell her how to feel or what reaction she should have. He listens to what she has to say. And he's like, you're 100% right. And I support any decision you make. But here's what might happen if you make this decision. Like, here's what the results will be if you decide to tell the truth.
Right. And this is one thing that I really love about this book, is how real Adele is, in that she struggles so much with all of these decisions that she has to make. Like, her mother and Max and her grandmother all want her to kill Tom and Molly. Yeah. And she's like, I can't do it. They're
kids.
Babies. They're babies. I can't do it.
And one was innocent. They just got bitten and didn't know what was happening.
Right. Poor little Rami got bit.
She took it better than I thought she would too.
Yes.
That little girl.
Yeah. She
was a brave little sport. She's like, I think I'm one of these now, right? And
she just,
and I was like, do you have to kill me? I mean, I'm supposed to. All right. That sucks. Let's do this. Like,
but I mean, so like, I just love that, because it makes her so much more real and relatable, in that she really struggles with the decisions that she has to make. And this is part of being a guardian, which is what I wanted to talk about next. The loup-garou. Am I saying that right, Bethany? Is that how they pronounced it in the
That's how they pronounced it on the audiobooks. So I'm going to say yes.
Because I am so not a French person. Like,
well, like, for example, I think I was saying Granger earlier, but I think in the audiobook, she was calling him Granger.
Oh, probably. But
and I'm like, well, that's too hard. I'm not going to say that all the time. Granger it is.
Yep. I'm not French. French is rough for me. I'm not going to lie. I can do Spanish. I can do Italian. I can do a few different accents, but I cannot do French.
Romanian accents, but that's very
I learned Spanish, but I went to like Spain and France. In Spain, I was all right. In France, I'm like, I have no idea what's happening.
Yeah.
I can barely communicate in my own language. So,
but, but I love, so this is, I love, again, how she took like Perrault's, or it's probably Perrault, maybe.
I've always pronounced.
Oh, that would be fun.
It's probably Perrault, because it's French.
I love that.
It's French. But she took his idea. But I love, how she took his idea about using a wolf as a villain because they're very much like a human. And and that's what she made them. She made the guardians werewolves, but we do have the white wolves too. So it's like the white wolves are the bad ones. And it says the white wolves are wolves that are able to take on human form, but even then they never stop thinking like a wolf. Red wolves are people able to take on a wolf's form, but even then we never stop thinking like a human, which means that despite our similarities, despite the fact that we're both loup-garou, their differences are profound. White wolves devour human flesh. That's why they can't live in human villages like the guardians can. So it's a very, very thin line with the difference, but there is a difference. But then
it's like the difference is like one of them, their natural instinct leads towards humanity.
Right.
And the other, their natural instinct leads towards the more animalistic.
Yeah,
so like the white wolves
basically.
are wolves first and humans second, whereas the red wolves are humans first and wolves second.
Right.
That makes sense.
It does, because then Adele experiences that. What it's almost it's like, because when she takes the pups and goes into the wolf and she stays in wolf form, she becomes like a wolf. Like she takes on, her canine instincts take over.
Much so that when she tries to become a human again, it's like a strange transition for her, and she almost misses being a wolf.
Right. And the dark wood talks to her when she's there. It tells her to do things like killing Granger's dad, which she does. And then
another thing that she struggles with mentally and emotionally, but it does seem kind of necessary.
Yeah. She kills Granger's dad, Simon, who was her best friend's fiance. And then she kills another man who came with Granger's dad. And then she betrays Granger. And this is all part of being a guardian. And she says at the end, close to the end, she says that, she feels like she's a monster. And, she says that the sacrifice of one life for another, that's what made us monsters. It wasn't the fur or the claws or the teeth. It wasn't the speed or the strength or the eyesight. It was the choices, brutal decisions that often had to be made in the heat of the moment, like having to kill all of those people. That's what makes them.
And she's not wrong.
Right.
But it goes back to one of those concepts that we see throughout history, throughout society, throughout literature. What's the greater good?
Right.
What is better for the many that might not be as good for the few?
Yep.
And how do you make those decisions? And who gets to make that decision? Who gets to make that call? I don't want to.
I don't either.
Not a hard pass.
It wouldn't feel my right to do that. Because why? Because I would struggle with that immensely.
Right.
Not to put on someone.
Hard pass. Yeah, I can't do it. But what we talked about before with military, they have to do that. That's service before self, which I'm sure Leah is a phrase that she's familiar with.
Yes.
Everything in the military comes before everything at home. That includes your family. That includes your kids, your wife, your mother, your great grandmother, like yourself, even. The mission comes first. And for someone like my husband in the Air Force, that's probably not going to be a huge impact on his life. But for someone who's like, I don't know, a drone pilot, maybe.
Yeah.
That might be a really difficult decision that you have to live with.
Right.
And that's why I'm not in the military. Among other reasons. But I just can't, I don't want to live with those decisions.
Agreed.
I can't even control my TBR pile.
Who can really? Listen, I have, so my TBR, I have a shelf. I finally I had so many books piling up on my nightstand. I finally this is a while ago, but I was like, okay, I got to buy something. So I went to Target. I bought this really fun, really awesome, like unique bookshelf. So it's up on the wall in my bedroom. So I keep all of my TBR in there. I was looking at it today and I'm at the point where like it's full and I'm starting to pile books on top of books. And I'm like, I hope it doesn't fall down.
I know I've seen people who get like a small library cart.
Yes, I've seen
and they'll
that.
keep their TBR on their library cart.
Idea.
And I'm like, that's a great idea. Can I have 4 library carts?
Yes.
So what I do,
they're not
what
cheap,
I do
though.
on my shelf is I pull it forward if I haven't read it yet. So books are usually pushed back. So if I haven't read it, it's pulled forward ahead of all the other books. And that's how I know.
Gotcha.
Like, I mean, in my brain, I already know, but that's like a constant reminder of like, stop rereading the Lunar Chronicles. You have a TBR to worry about.
I just do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've read most of my own books, which is fine with me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even give myself the credit of 50%. Yeah. I think I've read less than 50% of my personal collection.
I own like 2 shelves and I think I've read most of it.
That's good.
And I don't care. I don't care. I'm only on this planet for a finite number of days. And if I want to spend it buying books and reading books, then that's what I'm going to do.
Darn right. I fully agree.
Yep.
Amen.
Okay. So a couple other things about the Guardians. Okay. And I've got a couple more connections back to the original Red Riding Hood stories. So first, the Guardians are only women. They're only women,
love it.
which I love. But here's what's interesting. Now, before they change into being a wolf, they take their clothes off. Okay. So they're naked, which is a reference to that one Red Riding Hood story, but it's also kind of practical because Because then when they change
TV shows, they can change into an animal and they change back and they're still wearing their clothes. And I'm like, how'd you do that?
Right. Yeah, like, where did your clothes go? Why didn't your
clothes go?
I mean, some of them, like their clothes rip, which I'm like, okay.
Right. But then when they go back to being human, their clothes are magically fixed. I'm like, how'd you do that? And then they're like, well, magic, suspension of disbelief. And I'm like, no, magic. You could have written a way in and you didn't. Mm-hmm. Girls' clothes are gone.
So I do have to say, like, I totally appreciated that Rachel Vincent did this because I was like, it's not just a nod to that one adaptation, where the wolf says, take your clothes off and get in the bed with me. It's also practical. And it
very
makes
practical
sense. And I appreciate that.
Yes,
because
same.
There are so many, it's like the time I read a book. What book was it? Okay. I'm not going to remember now, but I remember reading this book and, you read all these fantasy books, you read all these things like the Hunger Games, right? Like where they're out in the woods and all this crazy stuff is happening. And there's this book that I was reading and it was like this, it was a fantasy. And this girl was like traveling and was like, I don't know what I'm going to do when I get my period. Like she was like, I have to pack supplies for this to take with me just in case. And I was like, oh my gosh, somebody gets it. Practicality. Yes. Like I get that it's a fantasy and all the things, but sometimes those of us who are very
girls got period. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but like just for people like me and you who are very practical, like logical people, sometimes it's like, I need that.
And it's like a book thing, right? Because like the book I'm writing right now takes place at a camp. She's at a camp all summer. Mm-hmm. And I remember talking to my husband, is basically my sounding board. I'm like, here's my idea. And I just rant for like an hour and he's like, great. But I told him once, like a while back, I was like, yeah, I'm doing this scene where she like is kind of grumpy because she's on her period and I'm kind of worried about it. And he's like, oh, because she's grumpy. And I'm like, no, because she's on her period. And he's like, so? And I was like, well, most YA books don't include a period. And he's like, why? And I was like, they just don't. And he's like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Oh, I love that.
He's like, this is exactly why girls have issues with their period, because you won't even put it in the book. I'm like, you don't have to tell me, because we know I love Marissa, but we go through the entire Lunar Chronicles, 4 main girls, 6 months.
I feel like
nobody got their period.
I know, right? Like this is but we love you, Marissa. But I feel like
I do love Marissa. I'll tell her myself, like, girl, what happened?
I think I'm gonna
How
need to.
did I want to know? Did Sybil buy her the nice tampons? Like, Cress is alone on a satellite. She's not given a lot of luxuries. I want to know, plastic or cardboard?
It's probably not the nice ones. It's Sybil. I mean,
Probably
come on.
cardboard.
Yeah,
Still
probably
awful.
cardboard. I feel like I need to apologize to any male listeners right now.
They're fine.
By this point, they've probably turned it off. Maybe I should
They're
put a
fine.
warning in the notes.
Girls
for
can't
this.
help it. It's a biological nature. We can't help it.
I'm gonna put,
Sorry.
like,
But I
yeah.
know for me, if I'm reading a book and it includes that, I'm like, thank you.
No, I do the same thing. So along these same lines, I appreciated that Rachel Vincent, for practicality reasons, even had her take her clothes off so that when she changes back, you know, her clothes aren't ripped and she can put them on. I did think the scene where she's with the pups and she changes into human form to get them to settle down. And then that's when Granger's dad comes into the woods and she turns around and she's totally naked.
She is naked.
And he doesn't know what to do. He's like,
He's just
"Shouldn't
like,
you-"
you're my son's ex-girlfriend, question mark.
And where
You've
are
been
your
missing for
clothes?
months. And now I
Yeah.
find you in the woods with a couple of wolf cubs and you're naked.
Where
This
is
isn't
your
awkward.
clothes?
Yeah.
Not awkward unless we let it be awkward.
Mhm.
So another nod to the original Red Riding Hood stories is, like I said, there's that one version of the story with an ogre, and one of the creatures in this and who lives in the dark wood is an ogre.
Is an ogre.
Yeah. We have ogres, trolls, snakes, the fearlaith, the snake-like woman thing, the white wolves, the vines that come alive, the vines that are like alive. and try to
Those are
creep up on
cool.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, I like
Because
those.
then
And
it's
then
like
goblins.
the woods themselves are
Mhm.
almost a character
I know.
at that
which
point.
I
They're
love.
one of the evil creatures. It's not just
Yes.
that it's like the woods is a bad location, like it's an entity with a voice and
Yes. It's
ways of
alive.
harming you physically and mentally and emotionally.
Mm-hmm. And then we have the goblins too. So
Goblins are
I
always
love all the
fun.
different creatures. I want to talk about like the ending of this book. Okay. Just to kind of wrap this up. So, because here's another reference. There's another reference to the original Red Riding Hood story in the ending as well, with how Grandma dies.
Mhm.
Yep.
So Adele brings the pups to Grandma, and okay, you want to know what my favorite part about this ending scene was? When she goes into Grandma's house and she brings the pups and Max is there waiting for her. He's like, I knew you were still alive and I needed
And
to
he's
come
got
here.
clothes for her.
Yes,
I know.
He has clothes
He
for
brought
her.
her clothes.
I know.
See, Max is the kind of guy that wouldn't care about a period. He'd be like, girl, I'll go get you some tampons.
I know,
good.
I know.
Do
I
you
know.
need some tampons?
But he says, but he says to her that he was certain, like he was worried, but he was certain that she would come back at some
Well,
point.
he is worried because
he's
he
there.
wants to know where she is and how she's doing. But he is,
Yeah.
I think you can be worried and certain.
Yes, agreed. Which is what he was.
Because you don't know what state she's going to come back in.
Right. And I love that. So she brings the pups back and she says that she wants to raise the pups and that she thinks that she can change them, like not change them, train them to be guardians, because even though they're white wolves, when they were in the woods, when they were in the woods, they were listening to her and following her orders and doing what she asked them to do. So, they are young. So she's like, convinces Max and Grandma that she can train the pups to be guardians.
It doesn't take very much to convince Max.
Oh no, he's totally on board with her. Grandma's
He's on
not as
board.
sure
He's
of it.
like, if you say you can do this, then I will help you.
Yes. And
Max
I love,
is just a prince among men.
he's fantastic. But I love too then that she's like, we'll stay here, Grandma. Like they're gonna stay at Grandma's house. And then her sister, who is betrothed to Max's younger brother, they'll be the ones to go to Ashbourne because originally
Max's family's town,
right,
or village.
Because originally Max and Adele were supposed to go there to help protect their village.
Right.
But now because of the pups, they're going to stay in Grandma's cottage. And then her sister and Max's brother will be the ones to be in Ashbourne and be the guardians over there. So that's nice. Like that wraps up really nicely and gives you that conclusion. Now, Granger's dad comes along. No, Simon. Sorry, this is Simon.
Simon's dad comes along.
No, well,
or Simon himself.
Simon.
Sorry, yeah.
And he sees, because Grandma's like, I have to go out and patrol the woods. So she goes out there and she changes into her wolf form in front of her cabin, like she always does. However, Simon happens to be there. And so he sees Grandma, and then he's like, he ends up seeing Max and Adele come outside, and then he's like, she's a werewolf, she's a loup-garou, she's horrible. And he kills her with an axe to where? The stomach. Hello, reference to the story of them cutting the wolf's stomach open.
Or gutting the wolf's stomach.
Yeah, cutting the wolf's stomach open too, because it's like right directly in the tummy, in the stomach. So, and then poor Adele has to kill her best friend's fiance, and then she kills whoever it was who was skulking in the woods, who was with him. So,
which I'm glad didn't turn out to be her best friend, because girls been through
that would have been horrible.
I know. So she said
I was worried that it was for a second there.
I know.
I was like, well, who else would it be?
I know.
Mm-hmm. It was just some dude.
That would have been horrible.
Yeah, and I like the last line too. It's like she just raised the crossbow.
Yes.
Very indicative of what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because Max says, I was going to read that too. Max says, Adele, Max handed me my crossbow with a solemn frown. It takes a monster. I nodded as I accepted the weapon. Then I pushed my red hood back and aimed into the shadows at the shape still fleeing down the path, and I pulled the trigger. I love it.
Because it takes a monster. I mean, it does though. Like,
yeah,
it does take a monster. It takes someone willing to make those choices, like we said, which are hard to make.
They are very hard to make, especially for a 16-year-old girl.
It's always a 16-year-old girl saving the world. It's never like a grown-ass 45-year-old woman who's had experiences and can make solemn decisions. It's a girl who's like got hormonal changes and a boy crush.
Yes.
She's like still learning how to style her hair, and she's supposed to figure out the rest of the world.
I will say though,
we're used to it at this point.
That's true.
Welcome to YA fiction.
Welcome to YA fiction 101.
I will say though that I love Adele's mother and her grandmother in this book too, because they are both very strong women. They're both guardians. They're both able to help Adele see that even though, she's got her life all planned out, she's going to marry Granger, she's going to live next door to her best friend and her husband, and they're going to have kids and raise their families together. Like her grandmother and her mother are the ones, I mean, Max does too, but because they are both guardians and they experience this, they are able to really mold her and shape her and say, no, this is how it has to be. And I know that it's hard and I know that it sucks because we've both been there too, but you have to make these hard choices and it's okay. You're better for it. You're helping people. You're saving lives. Like they're just very strong influences on her. We don't always see that in YA.
Yeah, usually the parents are very inactive, almost neglectful or absent.
Yeah. I mean, for this story,
they needed to be
They kind of needed to be. At least
because it's a family affair.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like for what the story is, like the basic story, grandma obviously needed to be a really big part of it. Right. Mom needed to be present somewhat, but I like that Rachel Vincent really made both of them, both mom and grandma, such a strong force and a strong presence on Adele's life.
Yeah. So. And I can see Adele being that for her sister when she gets older.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I also feel like when it comes to these types of stories, it does feel a little naive, maybe, all of those moments where she's like, we're gonna get married at the same time and live next to each other and raise our kids together. Like that feels like a very juvenile pathway of looking at life, because I remember being a kid and thinking stuff like that,
Well, yeah.
But I think it works for this village because what else were they gonna do?
Yeah.
Because, you know what I mean? Like this isn't like, do I get married or go to art school? Like, right. This is what they were going to do. They were going to get married and have babies. And why not do it next door?
Yeah. I mean, again, it's the time period. It's that time period.
Because normally this would feel like a really juvenile and naive outlook on life. But for this particular book, it works.
Yep, it does. And it's perfect. So, all right, ladies, any final thoughts about the book that you want to, or anything that we didn't talk about but you wanted to hit?
Just that it's not a series.
Yeah, I am shocked. Yep.
I agree that it shouldn't be a series. I feel like if she made it a series, it would kind of be like, where do we go from here? Like each book is going to be about like what her sister maybe.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
that's what I would think you would have to do, is you would have to then follow her sister.
Yeah.
You know? Like,
or do a backstory to the mom or the grandma or something.
Right.
So basically a prequel or a sequel.
Or
right.
Not a companion novel.
Yeah.
Right. But I think it's perfect how it is. And I love it.
I think so too. Because I do remember I got about 3/4 of the way through and I was like, how is she going to wrap all of this up in the next like 2.5 hours that I have on my audiobook? Like that makes no sense. That's not going to happen. But she did it.
She did. And it was great. I loved it.
Did a great job. Very impressed. I'm really glad I read this.
Good. Yep. I'm glad. That makes me happy when people say that. Like sometimes when I recommend books, I get scared because I don't know if people are really going to like it. So when it turns out that they do, it makes me so happy.
That's how I felt about Poison. I really liked it. But then again, I'm Snow White trash. So I was going to love it anyway.
You're so funny. Oh my gosh. She goes, I'm Snow White trash.
Oh my gosh.
Lily. Ask anyone.
Lily,
I've never heard that before and it makes me so happy and I don't know why.
Because it's hilarious.
I just think it's so funny. I'm Snow White trash.
Lily, oh my gosh.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Well, on that note, Bethany, why don't you tell everybody? I know you've been here before, but in case, maybe this is somebody's first episode that they're listening to.
That's true. It could
why don't you tell everybody about your podcast and where they can follow you and all the stuff?
So my podcast is Prince Kai Fan Pod. It's a Marissa Meyer book club podcast. Every week, me and a guest or multiple guests will discuss the Lunar Chronicles. We go chapter by chapter in publishing order. Right now, we are about 25% of the way through Winter, which is book 4 in the Lunar Chronicles series.
Yay.
And it's awesome. It's been endorsed. Well, not like financially, but like it's been endorsed on social media by Marissa. So I have like the stamp of approval. You can find us everywhere at Prince Kai Fan Pod. Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, all of those places. Instagram, Prince Kai Fan Pod, princekaifanpod@gmail.com if you ever want to email me. And then I am everywhere at Bethany Finger Author. So Instagram, Gmail, all those places.
Awesome. Well, Lily doesn't have a podcast, but she's great and fabulous and fun.
Thank you.
And I'm so glad that you were able to be here. And you guys should go back and listen to the episode that Lily did with me, which was about Poisoned, which was a Snow White retelling by Jennifer
Lily
Donnelly.
Said
Snow White trash, which is why she did that episode with me.
I've never heard that before. I'm sorry. That's just going to crack me up now.
So Lily and I dished through that one.
Yeah, and I've been on a couple of Bethany's episodes as well. So you can
I think we've done a couple of Patreon episodes together too. If anybody feels like going to patreon.com/PrinceKaiFanPod, there's like 50 bonus episodes on there too.
All right. Well, thank you both again for being here. This was so much fun, as always.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me as well. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you to all of you, my very valued listeners whom I love. And we will chat again soon. Today's episode featured the book Red Wolf by Rachel Vincent. Be sure to follow YA Book Chat on Facebook and Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you can get your episodes as soon as they are available. And have you checked out the YA Book Chat Patreon yet? You should. There are plenty of great perks for members. YA Book Chat was created by, is hosted, and edited by me, Leah Stuhler.